ή πρέπει να το κάνω? All right. Thank you, Dimitra. Okay, now maybe we have to start because otherwise we will have 2 minutes of. Okay. So let's start. I think it's better we start now. So I welcome everybody this afternoon in our webinar on gender in research in the field of digital, industry and space, integrating gender in these fields. So this webinar is organized by ΕΛ.Ε.ΓΥ.Π, the Association of Academic Women in Greece. Is an association that we are already about 15 years old. And I have the pleasure today to have with us as a speaker the president of this association till 2 years ago when I took over from her. So I'm very happy to present you Nancy Papalexandris, Emeritus Professor Nancy Papalexandris, who is going to speak today. Before that, I would like to thank once more everybody who joins our webinars. We are now at the 4th webinar in the row. We are going to have one in February and one in March, and we will complete the 6 webinars, each one on one of the 6 clusters of Horizon Europe. So our objective with this series of webinars is to discuss gender aspects in these 6 clusters of Horizon Europe with a view of presenting better applications for funding, and also to make a gender awareness, let's say, practice for researchers, young researchers in Greece from all universities who attend our webinars about how to integrate gender in their research. This is the main objective of this series of the webinars. Before I talk about our valuable partner, Kilden from Norway, I would like to thank very much my colleague in the Thessaloniki University, Professor Dimitra Kogidou, who is assisting us with all the technical issues. Dimitra is an old member of our association already some years ago, from the beginning, I think. And she's always with us to help the practicalities of the webinars. Now I will have to present you Trine Rosvik from Kilden, the most important association organization in Norway on gender in research, and we are very, very happy to implement this project funded by the EEA grants, European Economic Area grants. We implement this project with Kilden, that is a specialized organization on gender in research. So we have the pleasure to have with us and Trine, who is going to make an introductory speech now on gender in these areas. And then we are going to have our main speakers, who is Roger Sorau from Norway, and as I said before, Professor Nancy Papalexandris from Greece. We always have one Norwegian and one Greek participants in this webinar. I hope we will have a nice time today with all of us and discuss in as much as possible. So I give the floor to Trine to introduce the seminar today.
Thank you, Maria, for the introductory words. I'm happy to start over again for the time with this almost same presentation. So now I didn't want to have like the really, then I think you can see it now, can't you? Yes. Okay, so thank you for the introduction. I want to say a couple of words about Kilden gender research, and then something about Horizon Europe's demands to include the gender dimension in research, and how some concepts and examples of the relevance for research within cluster for digital industry and space. So I start to say to have a very brief presentation of Kilden Gender Research. We are a national knowledge center for gender perspectives and gender balance in research, and a independent unit of the Research Council of Norway. So we are more than 20 years old. We are disseminating research with gender perspectives in a variety of channels. We have this news magazine. You can see the front of our webpage here. We make reports, we have lectures, seminars, etc., such like this. And we also, it's for today's topic, it can be mentioned also that we actually, in cooperation with Roger, had made a report about Norwegian research on artificial intelligence or digitalization with a gender perspective, or consequences for gender equality, which is also in English and which you can find on our web page, where you see here the link. And of course, we always think it's, if you like, you can also sign up for our English newsletter, and I can give you the address, or you can write it in the chat or anything. But we also have on this web page, you can look at different topics, for instance, research on technology with a gender perspective, or the world of work, or any topic that you like to, that you are interested in. So, and also we made, some years ago, we made this booklet. It's like a handbook about what is the gender dimension in research, where we took for the basis was the societal challenges in Horizon 2020. So it's a bit different than the clusters of Horizon Europe, but still, for instance, the digital was not so present, but still we think this book is of relevance because it gives some kind of excerpts from different kind of research projects, which includes the gender dimension, for instance, within health, foods, energy, transport, environment, and climate, and safe societies. So you can download it here, and it is in English and Spanish. Yes. So, but this book is also, we also have a guideline of how you can work if you want to make a proposal, and how you can work to include the gender dimension in your research project. But we are very concerned that we're not like telling people how to do it. It's more like giving inspiration through good case studies. And with the Horizon Europe, it is even more strengthened that researchers should include the gender perspective in the content of research, because it's about, of course, one of those 4 important things about gender equality in research and innovation. And as in this very not very pedagogical slide, you can also see where I put this arrow that it's said that the integration of the gender dimension into research and innovation content is a requirement by default across the whole program. And the gender dimension is defined as sex and gender analysis. So this is very, very important thing. Of course, it's sex and gender. It's what is that? I suppose that most of you are familiar with these concepts, but it's no. But I will. I mean, it doesn't harm to repeat it. That sex is more about the biological, physiological, anatomical sex differences between female and males, like muscle mass, and etc. While gender is the socially and culturally constructed norms, values, and expectations related to men or women that varies across time and space, or what is supposed to be like female or male. And it's also important to stress that that there is not like a very absolute distinction between sex and gender. Sometimes they intertwine, sometimes they are related also to the different the gendered division of work or occupational roles, and also there can be like a combination between biology and socialization. And for instance, regarding brains, we also know that the brains adapt to the surroundings. And this photo is a typical photo illustrating gender, where this photographer and feminist Marie Høeg and her companion, who was also a woman, they used to play with the gender roles of their time in the photos. So I think it's a good example illustrating what gender may entail. When we talk about sex and gender analysis in research, there are some concepts that are very useful to learn. That is, of course, the gender blind research that doesn't take gender into account at all and assumes that the research is gender neutral, or that potential differences between men and women are not relevant. Whereas a gender bias tends to reproduce gender differences, or to think that a man, like historically, the man was like the norm in much academic research, and women were seen as the same as men, or even more often as deviant from men. Sex and gender as a variable, that is very frequent in research, and for instance in surveys, but of course it doesn't guarantee that the gender dimension is included in the analysis of the research. But still, we think that sex and or gender aggregated statistics and data are essential because they form the basis of further gender analysis. You have to start somewhere, of course. And while gender research is an interdisciplinary field developed mainly within the humanities and social sciences, and they have like gender as their starting point for analysis and often questions gender norms, etc. Whereas what we are, when we're talking about sex and gender analysis, that is our topic here today. It means that sex and or gender analysis is systematically controlled for throughout the research process and part of the research design, without necessarily be at the center of the research. And I think it's also, and it's of course found in most academic disciplines. It's also very important to stress that sex or gender analysis does not mean that you have to always focus on differences between women and men. There are many ways to work with the sex or gender analysis in research, as we will hear examples from today with the other speakers coming after us. And it's also, I think also it's important in our point of view, it's important to see also how gender intersects with other social factors, or such as age or income level or where you live or ethnicity, education, and so on. So it's also very important to critically reflect upon your own often unconscious assumption about gender and not start to reproduce stereotypes. So in Horizon Europe, the gender dimension is very central. I have studied the strategic plan and the programs of each of the clusters, and it's gender equality and inclusiveness is a cross-cutting priority in Horizon Europe and concerns all program parts, but some more in some than others. And one of the strategic orientations in this plan is to create a more resilient, inclusive, and democratic European society, prepared and responsive to threats and disasters, addressing inequalities, and providing high-quality healthcare, and empowering all citizens to act in the green and digital transition. That is like general strategy, but of course this certainly concerns people, and then gender is always has some kind of meaning. And it is also stressed that in this strategic plan that integration of gender is particularly relevant for the global challenges in areas such as health and care, online violence, but also like in artificial intelligence and robotics. So that our speaker Roger will talk more about later on. So in this digital industry and space, I have also noticed that Roger, he has actually got funding from this program. So in his current project that I hope he will say more about afterwards. But it is the point with the overarching vision in this cluster 4 is that of shaping Europe into competitive and trusted technologies for a European industry with global leadership in key areas, enabling production and consumption to respect the boundaries of our planet and maximizing the benefits for all parts of society in the variety of social, economic, and territorial contexts in Europe. And the areas of interventions of cluster 4, they are of course about manufacturing technologies in different technology in large, and also about artificial intelligence and robotics, internet, big data, circular industries, and even space, including Earth observation. And it's of course not in all these areas that gender is maybe space research is maybe not so much about the content, the gender dimension in the content, but then it's maybe perhaps more about a gender balance of researchers or space. But I think also that it's important that's one of the expected impacts of cluster 4 is human-centered and ethical development of digital and industrial technologies through a two-way engagement in the development of technologies, empowering end users and workers and supporting social innovation. When I looked into this work program, it was not like to include the gender dimension is sort of mandatory, but it's often repeated that proposals should take into account issues of accessibility and inclusivity, that was difficult to say, such as age, gender, disability, and socio-economic background. So that of course is also, that's why it's very often recommended, especially I have noticed when it's about robots, manufacturing technologies, and of course everything that has to do with the world of work. So, but I will not take the time of our excellent speakers. So I will give the floor to Roger Sørå, as he's called in Norwegian. He is associate professor at the Department of Interdisciplinary Studies of Culture at the NTNU, Norwegian University of Science and Technology in Trondheim. His main research area interests are the digitalization and robotization of society and the ethical, gendered, and epistemological consequences of this. He leads a research group on the digitalization and robotization of society and has a particular interest in healthcare technology and automation of work. He has just also published a book called Artificial Intelligence for Diversity, as I noticed. We are also very happy here at Kilden that we have had lots of inputs, and we can also have, if you want to read more about his research, I think also there are some articles on our webpage with a more shorter on his work. So then I say thank you and give the floor to Mr. Roger Sørå.
Thank you very much, Trine, and thank you for inviting me to this very exciting seminar. I'm just going to share my screen now. So could you confirm that you can see it well and hear me?
Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, and I'm very happy to be here. As you said, I'm associate professor here at the Center for Gender Studies and the Center for Science and Technology Studies at NTNU. And I think probably the reason I was asked is that I'm leading this project funded by Horizon Europe on cluster 4 called Bias, but I'm going to talk more about that later. I was also actually in the expert group writing about gender in research for the strategic plans. I noticed some of the work we have been doing there. So thank you for mentioning that already, Trina. So let me just start to say that this is my first time in Greece. Sadly, it's only digital. I would have really liked to be physically in Greece because this was my road to work this morning. It's very cold here up in Norway, so hopefully I can one day make it to Greece. Yeah, but I still hope to bring you some interesting topics for discussion for this seminar, even though we are from the complete opposite sides of Europe. But today in this presentation, I want to focus on 3 things. First, I want to have a look at how work is gendered. I'm sure there are many experts on this also from the participants. I then want to look at how work is automated and put these 2 together to see how we can understand that gendered automation of work. So let us begin with how work is gendered. So I have an example here from Norway, which is a story we often hear in schools growing up. We hear that the Viking men went to war while the women stayed home, presumably doing not that much. Well, actually, they did most of the work happening in the Viking farms. So this is 1,000 years ago. And I'm sure there are some similar stories in Greece where we hear that men were often the people who went to war, to work, while women are often quite forgotten. And of course, this is quite well known. But then we see several times in history that this is challenged, especially during war times from the Second World War, as we know from this Rosie the Riveteer campaign, where many women had to go into factory work and then didn't necessarily want to leave it afterwards. But this is, of course, ancient history now. But I've been reading a lot on how work is being described in both popular scientific literature and also more academic books, such as The Story of Work. And what really struck me is that overall, these history books, they focus on the story of man as the worker. They often have some small chapters on what women did at the same time, but often the role of women is quite forgotten in these types of books. And it's quite a simplification and also an othering of women workers throughout history that really discounts both the systemic exclusion from labor markets that we have seen through history, also particularly unpaid labor and how that is actually work. And many of these sources are quite Eurocentric, also ableist, and really gloss over things like slavery and ignores others than what we often see as the standard worker. So I wanted us to open this up a bit and see who are actually forgotten in these grand stories of work. And I think a gender perspective can be quite relevant for that. Now, I wanted to share with you one of the research projects that we have here in Norway. So this is a project funded by the Norwegian Research Council. It's led by us at NTNU, and we collaborate with Australian partners, with Professor Sarah Pink, who has done very interesting work on sensory ethnography that I can recommend. But in this project, we wanted to see how automation of work are impacting workers in several different industries. So we look at construction and the building industry, the healthcare industry, and also sale and service sectors. And I will, for this presentation today, focus on the construction and the health sector, since they are very gendered in Norway. So let us start with the construction industry. So this is just a bit of a depressing overview over the number of craftspeople in Norway, where we have about 5% of craftspeople in Norway being women, while 95% are men. And it's quite interesting why this is so. So when you Google the Norwegian word for craftsperson in Norwegian, you get this image. So as you can see, there's a lot of carpenters, electricians, a lot of, I think, almost exclusively men who are building stuff. And this is what we often see as the media representation of the ideal worker or the ideal craftsperson in this sector, very, very male-oriented. This is, of course, tied to historical gender division in sectors such as the construction industry, where gender roles and stereotypes play a big role, especially for societal expectations on what a craftsperson should be. Of course, we have the word craftsman in English, which is very often used, but I try to use the word craftsperson to, of course, open it up so that we also include women who are craftspeople. But there's a lot of cultural norms and expectations of what a carpenter, for example, does, and a lot of it is based on some false assumptions. So I wanted to zoom in on one particular type of craftsperson working in the building industry. This is a picture from Trondheim. You can see our big tower in the difference there, in the distance there, and the university also is present here. But here we see one type of craftsperson called a metal crafter or a wielder. So these are workers who often have to climb on top of buildings and work with metals there. So quite work that is not for people who are afraid of heights, of course, and it requires some training, some dexterity. But what they have tried to do in this area is to have a big focus on recruitment, particularly from younger women. So they have some campaigns showing, for example, how women can actually win national championships. So this is a woman from my hometown who recently won the National Wielder Apprentice Prize in Norway. So she's the best young wielder in Norway. And they're really trying to include more women as good role models for this sector to try to increase the number of female craftspeople. Then I wanted to look at another sector, which is the healthcare sector in Norway, and I'm sure there are some similarities in Greece, but in Norway we are lacking about 18,000 healthcare workers for the next 15 years. So it's a sector where we have to do a lot to have enough people taking care of us when we grow old, and also when we have other healthcare issues, of course. This is also a very gendered sector, but on the other way around. So we have almost 600,000 healthcare personnel in Norway. Around 16% of these are men, while 84% are women. So these are healthcare professionals like nurses. When we look at medical doctors, we have about 31,000 medical doctors in Norway, and here 55% are women. And this is something that has been increasing quite rapidly the recent years. Historically, we also had the sort of divided women being nurses, men being doctor trope, but this has of course been challenged now in recent years. But what we are really lacking in form of diversity here is more men going into things like nursing. So I want to focus a bit on that. And of course, we have to recognize the unpaid care work that has been disproportionately done and is done by women. That should also be counted when we analyze the healthcare sector. So these are, of course, roles such as daughters, granddaughters, mothers, aunts, female friends who do a lot of unpaid care work, taking care of both children, elderly people, but it's not often counted when we count who are working in healthcare. This is a picture from the Norwegian Nursing Association, and here you can see two men in the picture trying to, so that would be roughly 40%, while the reality is much lower. But here again, we see that media is trying to be used as a way of recruiting more workers. And I also wanted to show you a small video here. I think I'll turn the sound off since it's in Norwegian and tell you what's happening. Let me just. So this is a young nurse who has decided to become a nurse. And these are just some images of the beautiful northern Norwegian place where he's working. So I want you to focus a bit on how they portray him and the way he's doing nursing in sort of a cool way. So he has here some hair wax, he has lots of books, and also notice that he's soon taking the skateboard to work. Here you see the skateboard, so really trying to have young people also focus on things like nursing. So he's telling that if he could go back in time to his 18-year-old self, he would tell himself that you should try something different because you never know what things could turn out to be. And there are quite a lot of these commercials trying to get people to choose professions who are non-conventional, such as male nurses or female craftspeople. So moving on to the second topic, automation of work, which of course also has a lot of examples we can't go into today in this short presentation, but you might recognize this picture as the Ford factory, where we really started to see an automation of work, for example, through this Fordism mass production. Instead of a car being stationary and workers coming and fixing the car, we had the car moving on an assembly line and human workers doing the same thing over and over again. So instead of being a specialized expert on putting together everything on the car, you could now be an expert on, for example, hammering one specific screw into one specific part of the car. So humans started to be more automated when the factory also became more automated. And this is also related to Taylorism and the scientific management of workers, where Taylor, who was an American scientist, tried to really calculate how quickly can a person do a specific task, and then setting wages goals to the exact amount of time it would take someone, for example, to screw in a nail or things like that. Of course, this also treated humans a bit like machines and robots. But we also see now in the digital era that we have a lot of challenges that automation brings. So I wanted to focus now on something a bit more specific, which is human hiring bias. So if you think about the work that you currently have or your dream job, you might think that it is it might be more or less fair who gets the job. But human hiring bias has shown that this is not really the case quite often, even though one would like to hire based on very objective forms of evaluation and not really taking gender, race, class into consideration. We see that implicitly humans have a lot of bias when we do recruitment. We can have similarity attraction bias, where we often hire candidates who looks more or less like ourselves because we have this implicit belief that if I can do a good job, someone who looks like me could also do a good job. We have things like the halo effect, where you think someone looks so competent that you should hire them, or the horn effect, where you see that people look like someone you think wouldn't be able to do a job, so you don't hire them. And research has shown a lot of other types of biases. For example, the beauty bias, where you would hire someone because they, for example, look very beautiful. Now, this is quite a majority blind spot and can make it quite difficult to advance as the other in workforce. So if you are very different from the people who are hiring you, quite a lot of research points to that being quite difficult. And also here in Norway, we have many examples of people having to, foreigners having to change their last name to sound more Norwegian in order to even get interviewed for jobs. And this is not only in Norway, but a problem throughout Europe. But then I was quite curious what would happen if we, instead of having these quite biased humans hiring people, what would happen if we asked computer systems to help with the hiring processes. So that's what I will focus on now. First, some historic examples. Artificial intelligence, or AI, has shown quite a lot of hiring bias as well. This graph shows the percentage of women working in Amazon and some other large tech companies, where we see that they traditionally have more males working than females. And a couple of years ago, Amazon decided that they wanted an AI hiring tool that would help them to hire the best candidate. So ideally, they wanted a sort of engine where they could feed in the top 100 resumes, and then they would the machine would magically spit out to the top 5 after assessing them very fairly, and then they would hire those people. But what was discovered was that the AI tool did not recommend women to be hired. For example, if you applied and you were a woman and you had things like, I am the captain of the women's chess team on my CV, it would then be devalued. Well, if you were just a captain of a chess team, you would be assessed as a positive candidate. So what really happened to make these systems de-evaluate women? And also seeing masculine keywords like captured, executed as highly valued, while anything having any connection with more with women than men was devalued. What was seen in the Amazon example was that historically, the company did not hire women, so the system thought that women were someone that they shouldn't hire, which is has been shown to be very difficult to remove from the system. So Amazon had to just discontinue the whole service, since they couldn't figure out how to have the system recommend women on at least on the same level as it recommended men. Now, to also mention the project that Trine also mentioned in the beginning, the project that I'm leading in Cluster 4 of Horizon Europe is called the Bias Project. So in this project, which we actually started just a couple of months ago, we are looking at how artificial intelligence systems assess workers, but also how HR managers rely on these AI systems. And then especially how automation of work in the digital era is felt by the individual workers themselves. And we are trying to look at how different software to de-bias these issues can really help to have a more fair assessment of who should get a job, who should get a promotion, who should get some extra help at work. And of course, we think that it's very important for an inclusive workforce to think of several different aspects of a person all at once. As Trine mentioned, gender is of course very important, also education, class, age, ability. There are many things that comes into play when someone is moving through the workforce. So we need to really not think as machines, but really open it up for seeing the whole person who is working. Just lastly, I want to also say that this is also to do with reskilling in the digital transitions. So research shows that about 60% of the newly created occupations that we have seen in the last couple of years, such as data scientists, drivers on ride-sharing apps such as Uber, have been in more male-dominated fields. We also see that reskilling is quite important to be able to reskill yourself to learn new skills to work in these different type of sectors. Also being mobile, so being able to move, for example, to a different city, to a different country, is also quite important in these new occupations, and also having some degree of tech savviness. So being able to understand technology a bit more than on a general level. But of course, these three issues have quite deep historical, structural, societal issues that have been disadvantaging women for a long time. And it's of course not as easy to say that everyone can just start driving for Uber or start working in tech. We need to work systemically on how the education works and how work is structured. And of course, research also show that emerging economies are extra affected by these three issues of reskilling, mobility, and tech savviness. Lastly, I wanted to share with you some resources that we were working on with the European Commission on the strategies for implementing gender and intersectionality into new research projects. So this is a program called Gendered Innovation from Stanford University, but also used by the European Commission, where you can read on different case studies. I've written some of the engineering ones, but we also have some methods and checklists that you can look at. I can also leave the link in the chat afterwards. One example that I think is quite interesting and that I would also like to hear a Greek version of is how we often see that these machine translation softwares, such as Google, often reproduce assumptions and strengthen the ideas that men are doing one type of work and women are doing a different type of work. So this is an example from German, where we see that the more English neutral a nurse is translated as a female nurse in German, and a defendant is translated as a male defendant in German. Another example is Turkish, where we have neutral terms being, for example, that person is a cook, that person is an engineer, that person is a nurse, and that person is a doctor, which in English translates to she is a cook, he is an engineer, she is a nurse, he is a doctor. So I would be very interested to hear how that works in Greek. I don't know that much about the Greek language, but it would be interesting to hear if anyone has any experiences with that. So just to summarize lastly, the key things to take away from the talk is that automation of work has quite gendered consequences, both on who gets work, on the reskilling of workers, on the status of work and the status of workers. But through awareness and action, we can mitigate some of these challenges through, for example, an intersectional approach. And I write about this also in my new book called AI for Diversity that Trina mentioned, if you want a more in-depth explanation of some of these terms, of course. So I think that was everything I had for today, but I'm happy to also discuss a bit later after the second keynote. So thank you very much.
We thank you very much, Roger. It was really very interesting for me, at least, to see that stereotypes and gender bias is already integrated in the artificial intelligence. I mean, this is very new for me, because I thought that artificial intelligence can be a little bit more objective than more neutral, let's say, than human minds. But I understand that it reflects human minds. So
precisely.
So it's not at all less biased and so on. It's very, very interesting. Thank you very much for your talk. Now we will give the floor to Emeritus Professor Nancy Papalexandris, as I said before. Nancy is a professor of management and human resources. So Nancy, I think the discussion already started with the human resources. It's interesting. You are so close to human resources theories, and it's interesting to see that. She's professor in the Economic University of Athens. She was also vice rector of the university and very active in the decision-making bodies of the university. She has studied in UK and US, and she founded the master's program of the Economic University of Athens, a very prestigious and well-known master's program on human resources. So Nancy, we are going to listen to you with interest.
I'm trying to open my just a minute. I'm trying to find my
to share your screen. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, of course we have time, no problem.
I'm
Νάνση,
sorry.
βλέπουμε την επιφάνεια εργασίας σου. Όχι το PowerPoint. Μπες στην επιφάνεια εργασίας σου και άνοιξε το PowerPoint. Όχι έτσι. Μπες στην επιφάνεια εργασίας. Έτσι δεν θα
Μπήκα στην
μπορέσεις.
επιφάνεια εργασίας. Μισό λεπτό, γιατί δεν ξέρω τι έχει πάθει. Άλλη φορά
Έχεις ανεβάσει, έχεις κάνει share την επιφάνεια εργασίας σου. Δεν θέλουμε αυτό. Θέλουμε το PowerPoint να κάνει share. Οπότε πήγαινε στην επιφάνεια εργασίας σου και άνοιξε το. Κατέβασε. Ό,τι έχεις τώρα κατέβασε το. Κατέβασε
αλλά
το τι έχεις.
να το βρω από το PowerPoint και δεν μπορώ να το βρω και μου κάνει εντύπωση που δεν μπορώ να το βρω.
Το έχεις ανοιχτό, το
έχω ανοιχτό γι' αυτό.
Να θες να μου το στείλεις στο PowerPoint να το ανεβάσω εγώ.
Μισό λεπτό.
Πάντως κατέβασε ό,τι έχεις τώρα. Κατέβασε ό,τι έχεις. Γιατί, ναι.
Perhaps an idea could be to share that we can share her PowerPoint.
Yes, I asked if, yeah. Nancy, if you want to send it by email, maybe it's easier, I don't know. Nancy, I have your PowerPoint. Sorry, I have your PowerPoint.
Yes, but there it is.
Okay, because, all right, great. Otherwise, I remember you sent it to me, so, okay.
Nancy, άνοιξε το μικρόφωνο.
Now we are okay. Open the, yes, micro. Your micro. It's okay, Nancy, it's okay.
Is it okay now?
Yes, it is
Yes,
okay.
very okay.
Yes.
I'm very sorry about this delay.
It's off. It's
I'm
not
very
also
sorry.
like that.
It's artificial intelligence that is gender bias.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry.
Great. Perfect.
Χάθηκε.
Όχι, μια χαρά. Full screen.
Αλλά απλώς είναι μικρό και δεν το βλέπω.
Πώς θα το γυρίσεις τώρα, πώς θα πας στο επόμενο, μπορείς να πας στο επόμενο το βελάκι.
Το βελάκι στον υπολογιστή σου καλύτερα, αν σε βολεύει πιο καλά.
Is it okay now?
Ναι, yes.
Okay, sorry. Very sorry.
Never mind.
I'm very glad to be here with you. It's been a great honor to share with you this webinar. I've been in this association together with Maria for many years, and my main field of interest is human resources, and I've been conducting research mainly in companies about female leadership and about gender balance and about new developments in the area gender balance. So what I'm going to focus on has to do more with business and a little with researchers, and a little at the end I will say a few things about the newest digitalization plans in business. So I will talk about the lack of gender balance in European companies, gender diversity at the top, which is a very important issue. What are the psychological answers? How to overcome ambivalence towards women? And at last, I will talk about a new development, the introduction of gender as a component of sustainability, because sustainability is very high on the agenda of companies. And lately we have what we call the ESG criteria, which means environment, society, and governance. And gender is one of the main criteria for companies to gain points in the society component and be eligible for loans, for funding. So it's very, very important. Companies have now to prove under the ESG and sustainability criteria that they are doing they are taking policies, they are designing policies, they are taking measures for gender balance. Okay, so this is what I'm going to talk about. Now, latest development, in November 22, the EU Parliament voted that by 2026, all listed companies must have women in 40% of their non-executive directors' posts, or 33% in all of their directors' posts. Now, this legislation has resulted after many, many, many years of efforts, which started almost 10 years ago in 2013. Viviane Reding, if you remember, the commissioner at the time for social affairs, had initiated this quota. At present, this holds true only for listed companies listed in the stock exchange, but small and medium firms are for the time excluded, but they will soon have also to comply, because it's, as I said, something requested under the new sustainability requirements. Also, companies, larger companies who cannot show these percentages, they have to report annually on the progress made, which means that they have to do some progress. And this is the principle of comply or explain. If you cannot comply with the legislation, you have at least to explain what you are doing towards that direction. Now, it is interesting to look at the board participation across countries in the European Union, and we see that following the legislation, which was only a directive in 2013. So during these years, the legislation has helped some countries improve the percentage very significantly. So now, in the past, it was Scandinavian countries who were at the top. Now we have France, Italy, who used to be lower, Belgium, Sweden, of course, who was always high, the Netherlands, Germany, Finland, Denmark, Austria are countries which are at the top of the list. Of course, we move downwards, and then we can reach Greece, which is still at 16%, and Cyprus 14%. So there is still a long way to go in order to reach this quota. Now, of course, as you know, there is a lot of discussion about quota. Some people are very much against quotas. They say that if women have all the qualifications, they merit these promotions, they merit these standards. why should we have a quota? But it seems research has shown that the quotas have helped a lot. For instance, in France, among 200 global companies, participation reached 29.7% after a 2010 quota enactment. So the difference was spectacular. The same was true in Italy. In the US, where we have no quota, we don't have such an important increase, because companies, although there is a lot of discussion about gender balance, companies are left to do things on their own. Okay. Legal quotas are now adopted in some form across all countries in Europe. And also they have proven effective in getting more women on the board. As I mentioned before, US, China, and Japan, with no national strategies, had the lowest increases. Female CEOs at Fortune 500 countries rose from 1.4 in 2003 to 4.2% in 2013 only, very, very small increase. Now, why is diversity so important at the top, and why is there such a big discussion about this? This is all based on data from research across companies. There was a lot of research following the economic crisis of 2008 among those companies who managed to survive the crisis. And it seems that companies, according to a Leeds University study on 17,000 UK companies, it was found that one female board member meant 20% lower chances of going into bankruptcy. Also, a similar study in France found that the more women were present in companies' top management, the less the share price fell during the crisis in 2008. Also, a US study by Catalyst, it's a famous organization that deals with gender balance. This study was conducted among Fortune 500 companies. It found that there was a strong correlation between greater gender mix and better performance. And also, companies with three to four more females had 83% greater return on equity, 73 better return on sales, and 112 higher return on invested capital. Now, all these findings are very spectacular because they are also based on very, very large samples of companies. And as everybody now believes, even though it's very difficult to put into practice, better gender balance works because it makes women less bitchy and men less foolish. Now, this less bitchy is a very bad word to use about women. But it comes, from research that is being conducted every year from Gallup across the workforce in many, many countries. Now, the main question every year is, who would you like to have as a boss? Now, interestingly enough, the majority of men workers answer that they are indifferent to the gender of their boss. But the majority of women prefer to have a male boss. That means that women still do not like to be led or guided by female leaders. And this is something which is constantly being repeated year after year. And this poses a question: why men are indifferent to the gender of their boss, and women want only women? And the answer that is being presented is that women who manage to become bosses are often more, as the expression here says, more coarse, more bitchy in quotation marks than men. So they believe, it seems, that many women believe that if they reach a position of hierarchy, they should male leader. Stereotype is often that what causes their subordinates not to like them. Okay, so let's move on. Now, all this discussion about gender balance has to do, of course, with data that come from population growth. And from the tendency of women to participate more and more into higher. 2025, according to OECD, 63% of university graduates will be women. Also, we know that demography tells us that population is rapidly aging, and we need to bring more women into the workforce. Even in European countries, with the exception of Scandinavian countries, the rate of participation of women in the labor force is lower than that of men. So we need to encourage more women to join the labor market. And also getting the right leadership team with both male and female values and behaviors seems to be bring better results in any joint effort. Now, here are some of behaviors which, according to certain research, are being assigned or being practiced more often by women. Women are more inclined to develop people. They use more expectations and rewards when they are in leadership positions. They act more as role models. They act as inspirations, and they are more eager to participate in decision making. Men, as a rule, according to research, are more individualistic in decision making and are more cool and corrective in their actions. But both genders use equally often intellectual stimulation and efficient communication. Now, what I mentioned before about the success of companies that had women on the board is often explained by the fact that women are not so risky when taking decisions and are more, as we say, risk prone. That is, they take what we call calculated risk. And it seems that this is a psychological characteristic because women, as a rule, are a little more conservative. They have to take care of their family. They have to think of their children often, and this makes them a little more cautious about risk taking. It seems female voices in boards of directors where main decisions are taken. These female voices sometimes are very useful because they lead to more, let's say, balanced decision making. My internet connection is unstable. I'm very sorry about that. I don't know what I have to do. Okay. Now, when we talk about gender diversity at the top, this is not something that appears overnight, because at the beginning, nowadays, equal opportunities to women and to men. At the initial stages, we see that almost in the Western world, equal number of boys and girls, especially in areas such as human resource management, marketing, proportions of men and women hired. But as time goes by, after a certain stage in the hierarchy, we see that many women try to leave because they cannot cope with the expectations and the heavy workload, and men take the lead, and we have these big discrepancies at the top. Now, the reasons are well known, and there's a lot of writing about these obstacles to promotion. It's the glass ceiling, we all know, invisible but hard to break obstacle. The sticky floor, you stick and you cannot get promotion. The glass elevator, this is the inability to board it for moving up the hierarchical ladder. You don't have often the connections as a woman to what is happening, showed in the graph, where women leave their company for jobs where they can better manage their lives, they can have more work-life balance, or they can give more time to their family. Now, what is the diversity? Many companies now have special programs of
We lost Nancy, I think. Oh, okay, back. Ναι, ναι, τώρα ξανά σε βρήκαμε. Το μικρόφωνο άνοιξε. Φαίνεται ότι έχεις κλειστό το μικρόφωνο.
Τώρα, με βλέπετε τώρα?
Σε βλέπουμε, ναι. Ναι.
Μισό λεπτό.
Χάσαμε το PowerPoint.
Χάσατε το PowerPoint. Θα ξαναβγώ και θα ξαναμπω.
Okay.
Τώρα με βλέπετε?
Βλέπουμε πολύ καλά και σε ακούμε.
Δεν χρειάζεται να ξαναβγείς, απλώς να βάλεις το PowerPoint τώρα.
Ναι.
Τώρα δεν φαίνεται το PowerPoint?
Όχι.
Τώρα δεν φαίνεται.
Μήπως δεν έχει νόημα να το ξαναβάλεις? Έχεις τελειώσει, δηλαδή είσαι προς το τέλος ή όχι? Όχι, γιατί έχεις και τα τελευταία. Ναι.
Τώρα?
Τώρα κάτι γίνεται, Τώρα κάτι γίνεται. Αρχίζει. Εντάξει, ξανά ήρθε το PowerPoint. Τέλεια.
Με βλέπετε τώρα?
Ναι. Βλέπω το PowerPoint. Μήπως αν δεν έχεις καλό σήμα να σβήσεις την κάμερα, να βλέπουμε το PowerPoint και τη φωνή σου και να μπεις με την κάμερα όταν θα κατεβάσεις το PowerPoint.
Τώρα το βλέπετε, το PowerPoint?
Όχι, το χάσαμε. Να, τώρα το βλέπουμε. Πολύ ωραία.
Ωραία. Λοιπόν, I was saying that many companies have introduced now, especially larger companies, strategies for diversity and inclusion. Now, these strategies many times are not effective. Why? Because although they recruit, as I said, equal number of male and female workers at the beginning, they don't face what is called the leaking pipeline. And also they offer diversity programs which are not so well designed, because diversity is only a quantitative measure, that you have enough women or you have equal numbers at hiring. But this diversity has to be accompanied by what we call inclusion. Inclusion means that I have, let's say, in a project, equal number of boys and girls, but if the girls are not encouraged to contribute, then we don't have inclusion. So this is the second, I would say, aspect of diversity, which is inclusion. Also, we have what we call tokenism. And this has often happened also in top management positions. We have some women, but they are not given actual power. And also we have another expression which appeared lately, femme washing, that is companies showing quantitative results with equal participation of women, but these women do not have they don't play actual role in things, in decision making. So it's just to show and appear politically correct towards gender issues. Now, I don't know whether I should stay with this or do I have, how much time do I have left, Maria? Well, I'll just say a few things about this research among graduates of Harvard Business School, which found that showed that when they graduate, men and women have the same aspirations. But over the years, career satisfaction is much higher among men. Only 11% of women are out of work caring for children among these Harvard graduates, which means that women do not abandon their work for their children, but they go to different or lower paid jobs in order to cope with the demand. And also in some companies after motherhood, women are no longer considered players, and they have very low prospects for advancement. They are what the expression is mommy tracked, that is, they are tracked as mummies, so they have very, very limited opportunities to advance. Now, I will go a little faster. We all have heard about Sheryl Sandberg, the former chief operations manager of Facebook. She has her own now company, and she's very active in gender balance issues. And she has created a group where and a book also where she tries to encourage women to pursue their careers and not give up after a certain age. So one of the main conclusions is that there is a need not only for women's equality in the workplace, but for men's equality in home care and children rearing, because this is the main problem that we face also in Greece. Greece, as we know, is the lowest according to gender issues, according to the European Institute of Gender Equality. And this, I think, comes from the fact that Greek women participate much more than any other European women in home obligations, family obligations, and the share of men is not at all high. So this is what brings us so low, I mean, in this index of the EIGE. So more female leadership will lead to more fair treatment of all women and involvement of men into their family, raising children with higher levels of psychological well-being and better identification with both parents. We all know that it's better if children have the opportunity to get care from both parents. Now, what is needed is change in the company culture, closing of the leaking pipeline, that is the certain age where women tend to leave. Also integrate a gender perspective in company policies. I will go a little faster. Now, what happens lately, and it is also something that comes from research among younger women, is that younger women tend, when they enter a company, they tend to consider the workplace as gender neutral. And there is also evidence of what is called gender fatigue. People feel, well, we no longer want to hear about these things. Now women are everywhere. They have gained what they wanted. So why should we talk about this? But the problem is there. And if you look at the data and at the promotion figures, then it's that you understand that the problem, the workplace is not gender neutral. So companies must become gender bilingual, understand gender differences, and change from fix the women to fix the company approach, because this is the main, I would say, issue now. Some of the policies recognize that gender balance is not women's issue, but a business issue. You have to take advantage of all that potential that women can offer. Work-family balance programs have to be designed according to different career life cycles. Formal careers, spouse partner hiring policies, sharing parental leave. This is something that also our Greek legislation is moving towards that direction. We have some more days of leave for men, for fathers. Technology as an enabler for flexible working. We have seen this a lot now during the pandemic, and it's here to stay, because now we know that many companies give the opportunity to their employees to work 2 days or 3 days per week from home, if the job is such that it allows this. So this is very helpful for women, because they can share time between the office and their home. Also, gender audits, which help the company follow up and see what is happening, and also better boards through gender balance. Making the corporate rules of career progression and promotion more transparent and explicit, particularly through the crucial 30s decade. Getting senior executives, male and female, to pass on experience and facilitate objective promotions, and not expecting women's network to solve the issue of gender imbalance on their own, because in many companies we have this approach. You need to involve more people, not only women for women. You need also to involve men, and also men in senior positions, and also give it a budget, not just volunteers, budget for training, budget for redesigning, budget for audits, and so on and so on. And now a few words about sustainable development, because I think this is a very good new issue, and gender issues can profit from that. We know that sustainable development is meeting aspirations of the present without compromising the ability to meet those of the future. Now, these are the 17 sustainable goals established in 2015 by the United Nations. And one of the goals is gender equality. See, here we have gender equality, which is one of the sustainable goals. Now, sustainable development of business is measured, as I said at the beginning, by 3 sets of indicators. The ESG. E is environment, S is society, and G is governance. The first is, we all know, protection of the environment. The second is consideration of social needs of internal and external stakeholders, the social indicators. And by social indicators, we mean the employees of the company, the internal stakeholders, and also society or the community, the local community where the company operates. And also the governance has to do with the way the board of directors is organized, and how the relationships with stockholders and so on. Now, social criteria involve all initiatives that improve women's participation and development in the workplace, such as work-life balance, mentorship, upskilling, leadership or sensitivity, unconscious bias training. So if a company does any of this, it can be added under the social criteria, and it can get extra points, which will help it in its sustainability report, which sustainability report is becoming more and more mandatory. And also governance criteria, which involve board participation, pay gaps, gender balance in leadership position, is something that if a company takes some measures, establishes designs, policies, and so on, it can also show this in its sustainability report. Now, what is the importance of sustainability reporting? Better company fame and reputation, better appeal to investors and shareholders. It seems that in a few years, not only large companies and listed companies, but also small, medium companies will not be able to get a loan from the bank unless they can show that they meet some of these criteria. So here is a very golden opportunity for companies to introduce all these measures for gender balance, because there is now not only the ethical aspect, not only, let's say, the politically correct aspect of giving equal opportunities, but there is also a business case for going into that direction. Also, we all know that better internal climate and culture, improved reliability towards society, and improved approach to gender issues all adds to sustainability, and sustainability is something that I think is very high on the agenda, and it's very, very important for our society. And I will finish with saying by the CEO, by Citibank, women bring something different to business, and you need to leverage both genders. It's a substantive business issue. It's not about being kind to women only, I would say here. It's about ensuring sustainable development or the success of our business in the future. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you very much. I think for your full picture, really full, profound, and deep and large picture of what it happens in the industry, in the companies. I think it was really very comprehensive, and I think that in a way it was a complementary to Roger's discussion and presentation, at least in the sense that Roger told us about the artificial intelligence, how, let's say, the technology has integrated the stereotypes, but you have explained very well what are the stereotypes, this culture in the company, how women are in very different ways they are hindered from really being leaders and so on. So you describe the high level of the hierarchy in the industry, and then everything turns to become part of the artificial intelligence, how you hire people. So it is a reproduction of the situation. I would like to open the floor to our audience. I would like just that everybody knows that there are, I forgot to say that there will be also a seminar, live seminar in May, 8th and 9th of May in Thessaloniki, and the 10th and 11th of May, 11 and 12 of May in Athens. So 11 and 12. So you will be invited to participate in a live seminar, those who have already attended one of these seminars, of this series of seminars. So let's see if there is anybody who wants to talk, to speak. Any hand? I see Vaso Kidi. Vaso Kidi is a professor at the Athens University, a colleague of us, and she's also a member of the board of directors of our association. So, Vaso, you have the floor. She's a philosopher.
Thanks very much.
I hope your comment is...
I'm not sure. Now, I have a question for Professor Roger Sora, Sarah, if I pronounce it correctly, I'm not sure. I was wondering whether the relation between AI and gender bias that you presented is something added to what we already know, or whether AI is just perpetuating entrenched biases and division of labor and stereotypes.
Thank you very much. It's a very good question. And what we are seeing is that AI is both reproducing some existing stereotypes, but also inventing new forms of discrimination. And the latter is the more dangerous, because that is bias that we don't know about or that we haven't seen humans have. And it can be quite difficult to figure out what creates that type of discrimination, because when we have computer systems that are so complex that we don't even understand how they work, then we are in a real difficult situation when we see that they start discriminating. But what we are focusing mostly in our project, it is if they are reproducing human bias, because that is easier to check since we have seen it by humans. But we should be very aware of machine-made bias as well. Thank you for your question.
Do you have any examples of newly created, or you are just assume that there might be some new invented biases?
So I can give an example that is more towards racial bias that we are seeing a lot in the United States, where they are using different systems to figure out if someone who has done a crime should have a very hard sentence or a very soft sentence. And then we see many examples of, for example, there was one example of two young Black women in the United States who stole a small bicycle for a couple of minutes and just rode it around the block. So a very innocent crime, you can say. And they got a much stricter punishment than a white man who robbed a convenience store at the same time. So they were assessed to be very high risk, presumably based on the color of their skin, compared to this older white man who had several felonies behind him. So this is called the COMPASS system, that is used by the US legal system to assess whether someone should be receiving a harsh criminal sentence or not. I can probably think of some other examples as well, but I think Trina has her hand up while I'll think of some more.
Thank you very much, Roger. Thank you. Trina, please. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much, both of you, both very interesting and really, like you said, completing each other. I think I was actually having a comment for you, Nancy, that because these quotas, gender quotas in boards, in company boards, listed company boards, that was actually introduced in Norway for the first. The first to introduce this quota was Norway, so this had become some kind of export article to Europe. So we had this quotas in board since 2004, only for the listed. So it's like the companies of a certain size. But it has been done a lot of research on the effects, and they said that the effects is that there are more women. Of course, it works because they have to do it. But they haven't seen actually any changes really that the companies are better run, for example, or more effective, or actually changing. It's just it's more like they have there are more women, but they haven't found actually examples of if it had any other impact. So that is, but I think you refer also to research from the United States or more internationally, right? That have found that it's more innovation and going on if the leadership is more diverse.
It seems that all these quotas, they handle only the quantitative issue. How many? The second, very important, which is a cultural thing, you cannot impose it, unfortunately, you cannot impose it by law, is the degree of participation in decision-making. Because I can be member of the board and not talk a lot, or even if I suggest something, other people do not pay attention. So that is why diversity has to go hand in hand with inclusion. Diversity and inclusion. It's like, you know, both sides of a coin. Unless we have the second one, which is a cultural thing, we cannot actually gain from the let's say from the quota. Now these two big surveys that I mentioned, which are based on a large number of companies, show something. And as I said, the main explanation is that women are more risk averse. It seems that sometimes men are eager to take a lot of risk because they want to excel, or they believe that in that way they will bring great results and they will triumph, and become, you know, famous. Women are a little more skeptical about that, it seems. And that is why this is the explanation that is already given. It's not my explanation. That this is why in these large surveys, whenever they had women on boards, they had less bankruptcies or more survival. Especially after crisis, because, you know, during crisis, it's then that decision making is very important. When things move, you know, all smoothly, it's not so difficult. Okay, so
yes, because they also had this research that's showing that I think now it has changed, but in the beginning they were very much the same women that were sitting in several boards.
Okay, this is another.
There are some also some, you know, there are, you know,
this is what I mentioned, the femme washing. This is a very interesting new expression, that you do it only for, let's say, for appearances, to keep the appearances. And
or they just had to do it because they
had
to do
it on several board. This woman cannot actually get into depth and know all the problems of all different companies and be able to offer sound decision making. Okay, this is just a token. So there is of course the problem of tokenism, of femme washing, but I believe that things will change, because this shows that we have to take into consideration also different voices, and women have something different to bring to the table, to the board.
But I also think that they has, because this has been going on for almost 20 years, you know, with this quota women, for at least 40% women in boards in listed companies. And I think it has changed. It was more in the beginning that they were like many of the same women that were sitting in all these boards. Norway is not this very big country, you know, so there are a lot of same people. It was a lot of men also who are sitting in several boards, you know, so it was not unique. But I think in the longer run, it has changed. So now there are probably more, as I have understood from the research, that there are more women who are going into business and taking this kind of leadership positions, because the business world was maybe the most, and it still is one of the most male-dominated in our country, whereas in politics there are a lot more, higher percentage of women than in business, the top business sector. But it's also interesting because you talked about this family, the combination of family life and like this work-family balance, and because Norway was also inventing this daddy quota, this father's quota for paternal leave after when you have a baby. So that was actually starting back in the 1990s already. So, and that has certainly done a lot to make fathers much more involved in childcare and to raise their children, to go stay at home when the children are sick and so on. So that it's definitely that laws regulating things have an impact, shape people's life.
Yes.
Well, but I will give the floor to, if there are some more people, maybe then.
Yes, I don't think there's anybody else. I would like to add to your very interesting discussion. First of all, I would like to, the experience with quota in Greece, it was with politics in the municipal level first, already 20 years ago. In the beginning, everybody said, okay, there are no women, we have to find our sisters, mothers and daughters to put in the list, and so on. This was the debate at 20 years ago. Now it is not anymore, and I think that although we don't have high numbers in elected positions, but for the proposal, let's say for the lists, we have quite we have the quota, and now the quota is 40%. So I think the culture changes slowly, as you both said. I think this is important. And what I wanted also to say about in the business. In the business, there is also a very big debate about different style of leadership. So this is also an issue. Okay, Nancy knows better about the different style in leadership between women and men. And I think that this we have also to take into consideration this, because different style also gives more, I hope, gives more space for more women. And this maybe also change a little bit the situation if we wait for some years, of course, not immediately. Okay, so Vasho Kindi wants to say something. Yeah,
sorry for interrupting again. No, I wanted to say one thing about what Nancy has presented. I understand that in order to sell to business people, they need to have women on boards and directing a business, etc., is important. And so to tell them that if you have women, and we have surveys, etc., and if you have women, your business will do better, is a good pitching, let's say, argument. But it's not so flattering, I would say, to women. I mean, it's better to base our arguments on issues of fairness, because sometimes it's like saying that because women have certain stereotypical, probably also faculties and abilities, then that will help the company take its own way, go its own way, which will be profitable, etc., which is again by other standards, judged by other standards. So I would say that we should not to underestimate the value of these kinds of arguments, but I mean to stress more the fairness issue rather than the consequentialist issue.
I agree with you, but sometimes, we know this, unfortunately, this is the truth. like with programs with diversity, which diversity, of course, does not include only gender, as you know, includes race, includes different religion and different sexual orientation. So companies are somehow guided into that direction because people, decision-making, policymakers try to promote the advantages and put forward the advantages. And of course, in the list of advantages comes fairness, comes equal treatment, comes all these, you know, ethical issues, because we have also business ethics, which is something very I would think quite important. But the business case is something that will somehow encourage the businessman to give a budget to this, because you need also budget for these things. And the business case, unfortunately, is what will mobilize. Of course, all the other arguments have to be presented, I think. Okay, otherwise we neglect, I mean, the main issue, which is fairness and equal opportunities. Okay, which is the main issue. All the rest is just to encourage companies to put some more effort into that.
I think that we have to use all kinds of arguments in order to overcome the different resistances, because there are so many resistances, so many obstacles. So some people really give more importance to some arguments, some others to others. So I think we have to use everything, because otherwise there is no way out. So okay. So I think maybe Roger, you want to say something, or somebody who wants to talk now? Say okay. No, it's just a question about different styles of leadership. But I mean combination. Yes, I understand. But maybe it's not now the time to start a new question about leadership. I think it's better to stick on the issues that they were presented, unless if somebody wants to.
I can give a very brief.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that mainly in the literature there is two main types: task-oriented versus people-oriented leaders. Now, task-oriented means that you have goals and you need these goals to be executed, and you don't take into consideration the needs of employees or different situations. People-oriented means that you take more care of employee needs. Now, in between is the best solution, that you have to take care of people needs, and also make sure that you motivate them to such an extent that they are eager and motivated to fulfill goals. Okay, so through good treatment, through taking into consideration people needs, you can motivate them better to complete tasks that are the objectives of their work. So it is believed that women pay more attention to people needs. Of course, we have women who are very, very rough and who don't take at all into consideration people needs. And also we have men who are very, very, very kind. And it all depends on the personality. But in general, it seems that there is a tendency more for more people orientation among women. Tendency. Okay, but
yes.
it all differs, you know, across companies, across different industries. Okay, but there is this general tendency. The danger is for women in some companies where the style is general, very, I would say, coarse, to try when they reach higher levels in the hierarchy to try to copy And then they become very bad copies of strong men, and they are not accepted as leaders in that case, because it seems that women are, or employees are in general ready to accept more course, let's say more strong leadership from men, but from women, no. Same type of leadership from women is not accepted. They expect something different. And this also is something that has to do with stereotypes. But it's a very long story now.
Long story. Thank you very much, Nancy. You made it short and very concise. So, is anybody else who wants to say anything? I don't see any other comment. So maybe Trine, you are going to finish the whole evening today.
Yes, unless Roger found some good examples that he wants to share with us, so that he might come back.
Right.
Yes, there are many good examples. One that I could mention of an example of machines trying to understand society that went pretty badly is the artificial intelligence beauty competition that was held a couple of years ago, where people were encouraged to send in selfies, pictures of themselves, to have a very objective judgment of how beautiful they were. And then the system was supposed to choose the most beautiful people across the globe. And unsurprisingly, the system was trained on mostly white faces, and therefore it judged that the most beautiful people were mostly white due to the training data being fed, telling it that that is the way it should judge. So we must be very careful both on the data that comes in, but also how the systems are trained to understand data, and also how we humans interpret data that comes out. So it's both if we imagine it as a black box, what comes in, how is the system working within the black box, and what comes out of the black box, just to mention some examples. But of course we can talk about this all day, but I think I would like to thank Maria and Trine for organizing the seminar. It was very interesting to also learn from Nancy and all your experience on hiring. So I'm going to read a bit more up on your work. So thank you for presenting as well.
Okay.
Yes, then I also say thank you to you. If nobody else wants to add to something. Maybe I see some of you in Greece in May.
In Greece in May,
Also.
that's a good idea. We see each other in Greece in May. And also next one is on the 13th of February.
Yes, and then it's about energy and environment, climate issues. So that will be really exciting.
Interesting. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Goodbye,
See you
everybody.
in the next
Bye.
meeting. Bye bye. See you.
Bye.
See you.
Bye bye.
Yeah, bye.